for our diving. Hope comes and stops us in our tracks. Bravely we prove in our striving, trudging together each day. Where there's a will, there's a way.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Raw Recovery, a Trudging Together podcast. My name is Dion Miller, and I will be your host today. Today, I'm looking forward to this. We have Marshall, who has become a good friend of mine in my home group over at, I don't want to blow too much anonymity at our home group. We'll just leave it at that. And Marshall and I have kind of gotten to know each other a little bit, working with the group and, just kind of chatting around. We were just yakking about quitting smoking right before here and how we can apply those same techniques to other addictions that we have, and so on and so forth. I'd be remiss if I didn't say you can find us on Facebook, Trudging Together, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube. And of course, if you want to hear any of the podcasts or anything that we do, you can always go to www.trudgingtogether.com and you will find everything for your visual and hearing needs. So let's get on with the show. Marshall, thank you so much for taking your time today, this Saturday morning, to come on and share your story with us.
Thanks, Dion. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So this is always the fun part of the show because we never know what to say. So I always like to start with a question or open it up. So Marshall, what I'm going to do is, this is your show. I'm going to go ahead and open it up, and it's going to be yours now. So why don't you let us know a little bit about yourself?
Okay. Well, I've been in sobriety for closing in on a couple of years.
Okay.
I had a difficult time buying into the program into the beginning.
Okay.
It was not. I didn't have the principles of the program working for me in the beginning, and I had some really good sponsors. I actually had two, but that doesn't mean that I was, toeing the line. I would go out,
Okay.
But I did come to terms with that.
Okay. And do you think maybe talking to those people kind of told you what you needed to do when you were ready? Do you think maybe you got some information on, hey, I know I need to get back to this AA thing, or I need to get back to...
I needed to get myself ready.
Okay.
I was going through changes at the time. I had been self-employed for almost 50 years,
Wow. Okay.
And I was ready to close up. I'm 67 years old, and I started this business when I was 17.
Yeah, I was going to say, darn, you were pretty young.
I was real early. And I spent my whole life doing that. I had a few other things that I did as far as working for people, but I was always self-employed. That said, I was getting ready to close all that up and close up a shop. I was a piano man, and I had a piano shop for 45 of the 50 years.
Can I ask which one it was?
Yeah, Luke Piano Company. So it was a piano rebuilding company. I know there goes an anonymity thing, but I don't really care because that was what I did,
Yeah.
And I had people that worked with me. And it was getting time to close that up. And so I wanted to sell the property. I had a rental house over there. I wanted to sell everything, get rid of my equipment, and just sit there and do some service. maybe out of a toolbox rather than out of a great big shop, you know?
Yeah.
And so those days were coming. Problem was, is I had never experienced not having that responsibility in front of me, and my drinking certainly got in the way there.
Yeah.
I had tried to quit, and then things were going on, and as my sponsor used to say, well, you haven't experienced this before.
Yeah.
That's a pretty lame excuse, right? Any excuse is pretty lame, but I was going through things that were different for me, and I didn't control it, and I kept going out, and finally all that came to light, and I quit making excuses. In other words, I became honest.
Yeah. I think the very first honest thing I said in AA was, I don't know.
I think for me, it was, I have a desire to stop drinking.
There you go.
Yeah, and I am powerless, and it's become unmanageable. And I was told that principle is honesty. And it's not just being honest with you. It was mostly about me being honest with me.
Absolutely.
And that sunk in finally after a time out. I had gone out, and I was, of course, flat on my face, and I woke up and I said, that's it. I am done. And that was it. My wife had moved out, and things were terrible, and I was going to AA every day, and that made it really terrible. Try going to AA every day and then having, I don't want to call it a relapse, but where I would resume drinking because I hadn't even worked any of the steps yet,
Yep. There were many a times I left AA meetings and went straight to the liquor store.
Yeah,
happened several times.
Yeah. So then there was day one, and I got 24 hours. And I looked at that 24 hours as a spiritual experience when I woke up in the morning. And I had not had a drink. And I said, I feel good. And I relied on that for that day. Of course, I went to meetings. I did. I went to meetings. But I relied on it that day, and I've been able to put together 24s thereafter.
Wow. Based on a decision.
Made a decision.
So how old were you when you first started? When did your drinking career start? Did that start when you were
teenager?
I would imagine it'd be kind of young because you're a self-sufficient guy. You ran a business for 50 years, man. Starting at 17, you have to have a certain personality type to do that. That probably interfered with some things, I would think, though. For me, that'd probably go to my head.
Well, I was born in the early 50s. I'm 67. And I was from a typical family in northwestern suburbs of Chicago. And I was from a town where there were a lot of wannabes and a lot of have-a-lots. And, and we were somewhere in the middle of that. And, back in the 50s, alcohol was accepted. You could drink during, I mean, it was discouraged that your mom would start drinking at home because she was a stay-at-home mom,
Sure.
But they did. They were just good at hiding it. And I remember as a teenager, alcohol was all over the place. It was common, it was in the refrigerator. And it really wasn't discouraged like it is now,
Yeah.
It really wasn't. My uncle and aunt were raging alcoholics.
Okay.
And after my uncle threw my cousin out the second story window, he decided he would join AA.
Okay.
He joined AA, quit smoking, and joined the Catholic Church all in one day.
Wow. Wow, that's a lot.
I know. And my aunt died of alcohol poisoning soon after.
Okay.
And they found booze around their place for years afterwards.
Sure.
And that was my first exposure to what was called AA, And my uncle died sober. I think he was a long timer in AA. Yeah, I don't remember. I didn't have a whole lot of contact with him, but I remember, he was one of those guys where you would hear about, oh my God, the guy's been in AA forever,
and if he got sober, I can do it too, kind of a guy.
Well, and I thought A is something that I don't want to do, even though when I was young, I knew what it was, but it was the last thing in the world I wanted to be a part of, because I thought I was stronger than that,
Yeah.
I started school real early. I was like 4 years old when I started school, and by the time I was in fourth grade, all the kids were getting bigger. I was real small, and my mom decided that it would be good to, quote unquote, hold me back. And that was devastating, because that, to me, that meant you flunked fourth grade.
Yeah.
And and that was really the thing, is that right there. I go back now and look at, where did all of this stuff start? What happened? Where did these tendencies to be certain ways really come from? And I've walked the steps, I've been through the steps, and I've done a lot of that searching. I've done the resentments and the fear inventory and the sex inventory, and I also went through my character defects, and I had to, without a doubt, I had to figure out where a lot of those character defects came from. And they were from when I was really young,
Absolutely. Yes, they were.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I know that when I was looking at the reasons why, that a lot of them came up from us really young. And I've made big mistakes over my life too. It wasn't like I was sober my whole life. I started drinking when I was in high school, but drugs were easier to get. If you think about 1969 in Chicago, and you're in high school. That was rock and roll, sex, drugs. Man, people were going crazy back then. Yeah. Well,
that was the summer. That was 69. Sorry.
Yeah. Right. So anyway, when I was in fifth grade, my mother said, "Oh, well, here comes this new concept in middle school called teen teaching," and she wouldn't have anything to do with it. So she thought, well, here's what we'll do. We'll send him to military school. 1,000 miles away up in Minnesota. And truthfully, Dion, that was kind of like a group home for kids whose parents had some money, who could afford it.
And it's just a higher priced group home is what it was.
Yeah, and there was 83 other kids there, and I went for a couple of years, and it was disastrous, I would say, for my emotional sobriety or emotional growth, because now I was no longer living at home. I had no parents. I had a bunch of people that were called masters.
Yes.
And the idea was, and my parents were kicking around the idea of getting divorced, that this would be a good way to kind of protect me from what was going on around the house. Behind the doors, my dad struggled to pay the bills, and my brother was on the East Coast in Ivy League schools, and my sister was in finishing school in England, and and it was me off to St. James Military School I was 11 years old, Back in those days, private military schools or boarding schools didn't necessarily have the kind of scrutiny with those teachers like they would have had years later. Yeah. And so it wasn't uncommon at all to have teachers that were that liked little boys, and other boys that like boys. And so you kind of fell prey to whatever circumstances were going on around you. And I do remember some of those times, and I was naive as hell,
Sure.
Yeah, I was naive as hell. And I remember we would, and I brought this up the other day in a meeting, I remember we would hyperventilate, we'd hold our breath and pass out. 6th grade. And I was going, why the hell would you do that,
I don't know why we did either.
I know, but for some reason, it felt good. And I liked the confusion, when I woke up. And truthfully, I think that's where my alcoholism actually started. I think I spent 2 years there, and my folks ended up getting divorced, and my dad lost all his money, and and we moved out of the big house, and my mom and I ended up moving from place to place when I got back, and so in 8th grade we had no established house or anything, and my mom was a heavy drinker too. And I kind of got drug into some of the morals that she decided weren't really that important in life. So, yeah, and that also was another thing that you learn when you're young is like, it's okay to fool around, and, her drug of choice, of course, was alcohol. But I got drug into her affairs, and I developed a really unhealthy sense of relationships with people. And, alcohol was there, and I thought I could experiment with that. Marijuana was coming around, and, I hadn't even gotten into high school yet, and I still had what I thought were good values from military school, and and then I went into high school, and I started high school really doing doing really well. I was elected president of my class, and I was popular and musician, and but because I had been held back, I had a lot of friends that were older than me, and I would hang out with older kids. Well, that's kind of where everything went bad.
Okay.
And I had three kinds of friends at that point. The party animals, the hardcore kids, and, and the good kids. Okay. And unfortunately, I started hanging with the hardcore kids, and I did a lot of drugs and things like that, and I ended up getting thrown out of school. For distribution and possession and stuff, and I never did finish high school. And so soon after, I came down with hepatitis from dirty needles and things like that.
Ouch.
Yeah, it was not a good deal. My mother ended up marrying a local cop who arrested me one night, and so. That I had to get out of there, and so I left home when I was really young, and I made some really stupid mistakes. I did some time in jail I stole a barn one time up in Wisconsin. This guy said, "You help me go get some money to help this girl get a medical procedure that was illegal at the time." And I bought into that, and we got caught, and anyway, I ended up doing time for that, and so it was time to leave Chicago.
Yeah, it was
time for me to go.
So before we move out of Chicago here, I kind of noticed that you were always kind of set up to be older than you had to be. Like going off to military school. You went into survival mode, man, because you didn't have anybody around to protect you. And that taught you a different set of things, man. So you were forced to grow up way too early, man. That's kind of what I'm noticing. But that's why your friends were older. That's why you hung, and you were doing more mature things because you had been taught that you were, your childhood was kind of taken away and you went straight into being a young adult.
That's absolutely the truth. And I also had a sense of entitlement that because I was being so, doing things that I shouldn't really have been doing at that age, I felt like I had the right to succeed. Yeah. Absolutely. I get that. There was a side effect there that kicked in. One is if you get taken out of your house when you're a little kid, and you become angry, your emotional development stays where it was when you lost your family. And for me, it was 11 years old. So when I would get angry, I would act like I was 11 years old. And, it was like that throughout my whole adult early life. It really was. And I never knew why. Why?
Yeah. That was nuts.
Right. Why was I acting like such a little kid? Yeah. Because I never grew up. And it was always a reaction. I was not above throwing myself on the ground. I feel you on that one, Marshall. Right. It was. It took me until I was in my mid-30s before I had involved in therapy. I had to go into therapy for a domestic that I got into. And and this guy told me, he goes, whenever you get mad, you act like you're 11. What happened to you when you were 11? I said, well, I was sent away to military school. And he goes, oh, okay. So that's about as far as you grew up right there, right? That's about as much love as you got. And so he told me, he said, when you lose control, you go right to fear. And you either do two things when you're afraid. You either run or you fight. And if you fight, you fight like you're 11. So it was an eye-opener for me in my mid-30s, you know. Really, I was grown. I had kids by that point. But, you know, when I came to Colorado, when I guess I was 17, almost 18, it was lonely. And one of the things that I really looked to, because it had worked for me when I was alone as a kid, and I had an addictive personality already. I think you're born with that, you know. And I think I've always had an addictive personality, but addiction was nipped in the bud because I put myself right into poverty. I couldn't afford anything, you know. Tin can, Goodwill clothes, $3 tires, you know, thing. And so I got a job, started working, and I would say I did okay for some years, you know. And I did move ahead and got my company going. And I chased the almighty to stay alive. Well, that was a good thing. It really was. I think that was a good thing. But it still didn't stop that addictive behavior once I got where I had a little bit of money. I could do things. I would make bad decisions because I had never become what I'd like to call a real man. You know, I was always.
Well, you weren't taught. You were naive.
Yeah, and you talk about self-will run riot. You know. It was eye-opening later on in life. So anyway, years went by, and as I got later in my 20s, I got married in the early 80s, and. Looking back, I thought it was a good thing, but it wasn't an honest relationship either way, and alcohol was a thing there, and so was things like cocaine and stuff, you know. She had a kid from a previous marriage, and, you know, so there was a child in there that, you know, and it was not a good environment. Looked good from the outside, bad on the inside.
All right.
Yeah, and so by about 1985, we decided to call it quits. And so she ended up getting pregnant, and when we got divorced, she was pregnant then, and I thought that it was my responsibility. And so when this baby was going to be born, I took responsibility for that and brought her back and said, okay, doesn't matter whether we're divorced or not, we're going to try this again. And so then I spent the next year raising this little boy, and, you know, we were trying our best. Well, turned out a year later that it wasn't my son. And and then alcohol became a real personal leaning post for me. And I left, and that would break my heart. Yeah, it was very tough, you know, because I thought that kid was mine, and it turned out, you know, a year later that he's not, and I didn't do well after that. I did keep my nose to the grindstone about working and stuff like that, but I had a some pretty heavy drinking in the years
Sure.
that followed that. And then I met my wife that I am married to now. We've been married for 32 years. Yeah, and we
Great job. I got to do some clapping on that, man.
30,
Good job, man.
32 years. And so we spent the next 30 years, raising two boys that were my own, and for 20 out of those 30 years, life, I did a pretty decent job of staying sober. At least I appeared sober, kind of. If I had an opportunity, I would find a way, but like I said earlier, a domestic put me into therapy, and that really helped me become a realized man. And I did learn a lot. That went on okay, but when my last son left for college, we openly started drinking again, and then I was diagnosed with MS, and so Scotch worked really well to get rid of neuropathy, and it was like a perfect excuse, Sure. And onward, I would drink, and at this point, then it was no governor. I started blacking out. I drunk long enough now to where alcohol was starting to really raise its ugly head, as we know from AA. And then in 2018, I had a neck fusion, and because I had a stenosis in my neck, and I had this operation done, and I came down with sepsis. And sepsis killed me. I mean, on the table. I had to go back in for surgery and get jump started, and that experience haunts me still.
I'm sure.
Yeah, after that, alcohol got really, really bad because I was really sick for a long time, and that's when I knew I needed the program, but I just kept fighting it, and finally, a couple years later, I went to the Dragon's Den, and like I said, I had some relapses, and now I was in the program, and I was able to get some honesty. And that's when my higher power first showed up, and by day, it's been getting better ever since. Sobriety insurance for me is a meeting every day, Dion.
Absolutely.
And when COVID came, I had 90 days of sobriety.
Wow.
I was still pretty tender, but I signed on to the Zoom thing, and the next thing, the guy who was putting it together just kind of dumped the whole thing in my lap, and he said, here, Marshall, you take care of this, and he had to go to work, So it became, at that point, Dion, it was like survival of the fittest,
Yeah.
And there was a few of us that we try to keep it together. And, there was new people coming in there that had never been in an in-person meeting. And they did things like say, will you be my sponsor? Well, shit. I worked with my sponsor, and I said, this guy wants me to be a sponsor. He goes, be a sponsor. You know more about it than he does. But I will tell you that I really felt unqualified, So I don't think that AA will ever be like it was pre-COVID anymore. I think sobriety is available to people who can't get out, And the virtual format really does work. I think a lot of people will disagree with that. But look at some of our meetings. I mean, they're powerful. And,
They are.
and yeah, and my sponsees are closing in. I have a couple sponsees closing in on a year,
Yeah.
and so.
Well, and I'd like to throw some things in on Zoom about that, because I love Zoom. Thank you, Zoom, for not raising your prices, for being a decent company, man. What a great company.
No kidding.
But it's another way for us to get together. I deal, and there's a lot of people like me, and I deal with PTSD and anxiety. It's hard for me to do a lot of things that other people do. So the Zoom platform is nice for me. And no, it's not going to go away. It's not going to go back to the way that it used to be, because it no longer exists, that's for sure. But I think that the Zoom meetings are just as powerful as in-person meetings. It's just how open-minded and willing are you?
Well, and there's a thing about accountability too with Alcoholics Anonymous, and
Bingo.
one of it is if you say that you're going to go to a meeting every day, and you're going to be accountable to yourself.
Yeah.
Then get in your car and go to a meeting, right?
Yeah.
Well, it's accountability in Zoom is. I don't think I'll go today. And hey, wait a minute. You said you were caring today, so there are differences in Zoom than you would get from in-person meetings. But I practice a few principles to ensure that I stay sober. One, I go to a meeting every day.
Yes.
I still talk to my sponsor. I read the book, and I worked the steps, and I worked the steps again and again.
Yep.
I like to participate, and so I talk to people. I read some outside stuff, and I write stuff down in a book. Now, I'm not, I'm not a journalist or anything like that, but
sure,
that helps me remember.
There's something about pen to paper that's just powerful.
Yep.
I have little notes everywhere, just reminders, man.
Right. And I hold myself accountable to myself and to the members of my group.
Fantastic.
And I will say, and it should have been number one, that I pray and meditate every day. That's how I start, and that's how I end. And then finally, the last real key to sobriety is do something other than AA. That's good for you.
Yep.
That's living. That's not just surviving. So, if you play the piano or you play drums or you train your dog or do something outside of AA.
Yes, you do.
That helps keep the squirrels out of your head.
Yeah, it helps so much. And it says it on page 164 to go do that.
Yeah.
It says, you will surely meet some of us as we trudge the happy road of destiny.
That's right.
That's where I stole the name from, by the way.
I like it.
That's where I got Trudging Together. So, yes, see, there are some people that are okay, and they like to, what I call, settle for that. And that's okay. I love going beyond, man. That's why I love doing podcasting. I love listening to stories. I love participating in stories. And being a part of it and creating safe places for people to come and talk freely, because I found I had to find, I put this together because there wasn't one.
Well, and the Zoom thing was a trial and error in the beginning, and a lot of things worked and a lot of things didn't work. And, when I say accountable and starting Zoom meetings, it was like, okay, are you guys going to be here every day? And of course, guys with 12 and 15 years, go, no, I'm not going to be here every day. And I said, somebody needs to be here every day,
Yeah.
So, and then there's service positions that have come up that are radically different than, the literature chair or the grapevine rep, and so, the treasurer, they said, well, how are we going to raise any money? We didn't do that for a while. So we came up with the Give Butter thing, and we raised money. We've kicked in a lot of money into the coffers of AA over the last year and a half,
Yeah.
And then be a sponsor, and we have a treatment rep, and I think getting people involved in treatment is really important thing to do for a group.
Agreed.
Because that's where
a detox.
Yep, that's where they come from.
But that's treatment.
Right. You talk to the people that come into AA. Where are they coming from?
Yeah.
They're coming. Yeah, detox treatment center. And the thing is you can't stay in there forever. So what are you going to do? You got to go to AA. It's free.
Yeah, and you got to find a sufficient substitute.
Yeah, this is.
And you know what? The cost of living in AA doesn't go up either. The first time I went to a meeting in 1984, I put $1 in.
Yeah.
I still put $1. Well, so if I have extra money, I'll throw in a $5 or whatever. Yeah. But it's still $1.
It is.
Our coffee is still $1.
Right.
But we do need those extra service things because we're not pouring coffee, we're not emptying cigarettes, we're not really having that face-to-face greeter. But there's plenty of service work in those Zoom meetings. Yeah, there's a lot of back end stuff that happens that people, if you haven't run one, then you don't know.
Well, and here's a good example of the last 24 hours. When one of our members hasn't shown up for 5 days, and when I spoke with this member on the phone, I was told that she had to put her cat down. And the next day. And I didn't hear from her anymore. And now, we don't sponsor women, and women don't sponsor men, but hey, in AA, I'll talk to anybody. I won't be a sponsor, but I'll.
But I could be a closed mouth friend.
There you go, and
I can be that.
Yeah, and so it turned out that she's been gone a while, and so now we're actually putting together a 12-step call to get over there. There's a lot of work you have to do sometimes to hold it all together, and not like that fella said at the meeting today. I'm not looking for a pat on the back. I just want to see that tomorrow goes good too for everybody.
Absolutely, that's it.
That's what God tells me is just do the next right thing. Yeah.
And if you've done the work, you're going to hear your answer. God answers me almost immediately anymore. But that took some time. I had to give myself a chance, man. And it's different for everybody. I wasn't ready to do a lot of this stuff until I was 2.5 years sober, but I needed that time. I went pretty far down the scale. Yeah, I should not be alive. Yeah. I tell people I look like a Simpson character when I came in. I was yellow. I don't know how God does for us what we cannot do for ourselves, and we talked about this in the meeting. Is our reliance upon God always needs to be there, and we can't be afraid to ask God for help. I think sometimes we tend to get into the program for a little bit, and then we want to start taking back a little bit of control when what we need to do is give up more.
Very true. become used to saying the word.
Yeah. Yeah.
Where
And
where it's comfortable.
yeah. And then being the word. You know?
Yeah.
That's what I
Put
what
it
I love
into
about my words now match my actions. So I don't have to explain myself to anybody but God.
There you go.
You know? And as God's children, we stand on our own 2 feet. And gosh, that feels nice to be able to stand on my own 2 feet. Don't need to pat myself on the back about it.
Mm-mm.
You know?
Yeah.
Or
and not every day is going to be perfect.
oh, heck no.
Right.
No, I'm going through some crap right now, right? But we can always stop to get out of ourselves. That's how we stop the squirrels. All right. Do you have any parting words of wisdom you'd like to shout out?
Sure. Keep coming back. It works if you work it.
There you go. Keep it nice and simple.
Yeah, it is real simple.
It is. Yeah, and that's the other thing is we are highly intelligent people. I have not met an alcoholic or an addict that isn't highly intelligent. Even if you think they're not, they are. Trust me. All right. And we all have different things, and that's okay. You know, Marshall deals with MS. I deal with anxiety, but we can still come together on a common solution. Let it go, let God do the right thing and help other people, man. So, all right. Well, Marshall, thank you for taking your time. I certainly appreciate it. Thank you for letting me reset the time. I appreciate that too. So
no problem, Dion. Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. And for my listeners, thank you for being here. This has been another episode of Raw Recovery. I love all of you guys. You know I do. Peace out and have a day.